special international edition tonight of Wharfdale Naturalists, because not only am I still in Denmark, Jeff tells me he's in Fuerteventura. So it really is an international show this evening. Steve is in Scarborough, which may not be quite so exotic, but equally beautiful, actually much more beautiful than the bit of Denmark I'm currently in, I would venture to suggest. Thank you once again to Anne and Riley for those fantastic slides, just incredible pictures. I never cease to marvel, having watched Anne's slides, at how incredible the insect kingdom is and how beautiful, just absolutely astounding. So thank you very much again, and indeed all these weeks past, for providing those photos, and they're just incredible. Okay, just in case some of you haven't been here before, the way things work is that we like you, if possible, to put your questions in the Q&A as the talk proceeds. It just gives Jeff a chance to sort of sort through them, decide on a sensible running order for them. Once we get to the end of the talk, it just makes life a little bit simpler. So if you wouldn't mind, if a question occurs to you that you want to ask while you're listening to Steve, if you would please pop it in the chat, that would be absolutely great. Okay, so without more ado, let me introduce our speaker, who is Steve Race. As I've said, he's based in Scarborough, not just now, but in general. He's an award-winning professional wildlife photographer. He's been a keen naturalist and photographer for over 35 years. He's lived on the Yorkshire coast all his life, and he believes there's no better place for variety of habitats and amazing wildlife. And I think we probably all say amen to that. Inspired by the natural world around him, Steve captures incredible wildlife images. In 2013, he was commended in the Wildlife Photographer of the Year Awards, which is an amazing achievement. I know how many submissions there are for that. It's also been commended in Big Picture USA Natural World Photography Competition and the British Wildlife Photographer of the Year Awards in 2015. Highly commended, in fact, in 2015. His work's been published all over the place, national and regional media and magazines, leaflets, websites, all sorts of publications. He's also a bit of a TV personality. You might have spotted him on Country File, Channel 4's Sunday Brunch, and various regional television programmes as well. Steve's previously worked for the RSPB, as education officer at Bempton Cliffs for 6 years, and has taken part in lots of projects for the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, the National Trust, and lots of other conservation organisations. And he's currently a director of nature tourism company Yorkshire Coast Nature, which is based in North Yorkshire. And tonight, much to my delight, he's going to be talking about somewhere I love very much indeed. The talk is entitled Wild Shetland. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Helen. I'll just share my screen, everybody. There we go. Great. So thank you for inviting me to talk to Wharfdale Naturalists again tonight, even though if it's from the office rather than in a live variation. Hopefully we'll get back to that very soon. And like Helen said, I am talking about Wild Shetland tonight. So not normally I'm talking about Bempton Cliffs or the Yorkshire coast or other places close to home. But I've been travelling to Shetland now for a few years and obviously delivering wildlife photography tours up there as well. So it is another place that's close to my heart just because of the beautiful array of wildlife and scenery and just the sheer wilderness up there. It's fantastic. So for those of you that haven't been to Shetland before, I'm sure most of you have, and most of you probably do know where it is, but if not, here's a slide just to show you where it does lie, because some people do think it's sometimes near the Orkneys or near the Hebrides, but it's actually right up in the, literally in the right-hand corner, the last piece of UK soil before you literally go over the sea to Norway. So it's just up in that top right hand corner there. So it's an archipelago of islands. There's mainland Shetland, which obviously is the main big piece of the main island. You can see in this map here, and then there are islands left and right, but mainly up the north of Shetland are all the array of other islands, such as Fetler, Yell, Unst, and a few others, Out Skerries, etc. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a whirlwind ride all the way through Shetland, from mainland up through those other islands, and also to a few of the other islands that I've not just mentioned yet. So though, if you're thinking of travelling to Shetland, there's two ways of doing it. You can either fly, or you can take the ferry. The ferry goes from Aberdeen. So I normally take the train up to Aberdeen and then across on the ferry. Obviously, you can take your vehicle on the ferry if you want to go for a longer periods of time and do a bit of touring round, maybe if you've got a motorhome, or if you're willing to do a bit of Airbnb and tour around, which I do recommend. So the ferry goes from Aberdeen. It's a 12-hour ferry ride, and it goes across and then it comes into Lerwick, which is the capital of the Shetlands. And this is an image here just showing you Lerwick as you approach by the ferry. The reason why I go by ferry is I take a lot of camera equipment with me, so we will go over the luggage allowance for aircraft, so I tend to do that option. But flying wise, it only takes about an hour to fly over from Aberdeen, or you can fly from Newcastle or even other international airports within the UK. So what I love about Shetland is the sheer wilderness, the sheer beauty of especially the coastline, the rocky coastline you can see here in this image. And this image was taken on the Isle of Unst, the most northern isle of the Shetland Isles. And you can see one of my fellow colleagues, friends here coming up the cliff, Richard Shucksmith, who's a marine photographer and a great naturalist. And general wildlife photographer who's won lots of awards, who's based in Shetland, that I spent some time with prior to going up there myself and doing tours and workshops up there. And you can see him just coming up the side of the cliff here. And you can see it's actual part of a gannet colonies, this image. There's thousands of gannets up on the northern end of Unst, and the nature reserve there that I'll mention a little bit later on. But it's not all sort of rocky coastline, even though it seems very wild when you get up there. There's lots of little coves and bays, and here you can see a lovely piece of beach here. So again, slightly different habitat, a little bit flatter, so you do get different species of wildlife across these different areas, really. It's not got a lot of woodland or forest or trees. In fact, one of the best jobs in the world, I think, is Forestry Commission Officer for Shetland, where he's looking after his 10 trees on the islands. But there are more than that, obviously, but it's very, very open, very, very grassy, lots of high hilltops and rocky coastline. But what I'd like to start with, first of all, is a few different bird species, and especially with some of the commoner ones. So starlings, we all love starlings, and in Shetland they're very, very common indeed. And for photography, they're quite approachable as well. They're slightly different, I feel, to our starlings we get in the UK, just a little bit. If you look at the plumage on here, they're not very speckly. So they're more glossy green and purple in summer plumage. So I mainly go and visit Shetland through the summer months, May, June, July. And this was taken in May, quite a few years back. But they're very approachable. You'll see them on the stone walls and on some of the ruins and on fence posts and things like that as you go through the countryside. And they just literally stand and stare at you and sing away and display, really. This one's displaying to a little group of females. But you can see here that it's lacking the spots and colours that we normally get, even though it's not a different species at all or subspecies. It just looks slightly different in plumage up in Shetland, the high north, than they do through the UK. And another common species is the wren. The Shetlanders actually call this the Shetland wren, and this is slightly different to ours, I feel, but yet it's not listed as a subspecies or anything. So there isn't such a thing as a Shetland wren as such, but that's what all the locals call it. It's their Shetland wren. It has a much longer, stiffer tail than our wren and a much thicker bill as well than ours, but same size. And they're quite approachable again. So if you get the opportunity to go to Shetland, try and look out for Shetland wren and get that on your list and try and get a few pictures, because they are quite a cute little thing. They're common. You'll see them in most places you travel around. And then corvids, and I said corvids then, I've got to get this right, not corvids, corvids up in Scotland are what was one of the family of birds I wanted to try and see was some of these birds, which is especially the raven. There's hooded crow as well. I haven't put a slide in of hooded crow tonight, but obviously up in Scotland, hooded crow and raven. And for me to get close to raven, because we don't get many ravens along the Yorkshire coast, maybe one or two occasionally turn up out of the blue, but they're quite a rare species. So for me to get close to the ravens was quite nice. So I've actually added a few Shetland / Scottish names now, all the species, for you to have a read and see if you can pronounce them. So Corby is the raven. And the ravens are fairly common. Sometimes you get them in big flocks, a bit like rooks and carrion crows you get in the UK, but normally they're in 1s or 2s. And they're mainly feeding on carrion, obviously, anything that's unfortunate to have perished on the roadside. Or even sometimes you come across a dead lamb or a dead sheep and you'll see the ravens from a distance. So you just got to creep up slowly and try and get close to them to get some good views. And then look at this, this is fantastic. What a picture of a red-throated diver. So one of my key species to go and photograph when I first went to Shetland, and still is now really, is the red-throated diver in summer plumage. So Richard Shooksmith, who I stayed with for my recce trip a few years back, he said, I'll take you up to a lochen, small, which is basically like a small pond, up on some of the high hilltops on mainland Shetland. And he goes, I know where there's a pair breeding at the moment. He's got a level 1 license, so we could approach them. Obviously kept our distance because they were breeding. I was getting really excited because I see lots of red-throated divers. In fact, I had 2 today just off Scarborough's Marine Drive. We get them in winter down the Yorkshire coast. We had 5 in Scarborough Harbour last week. I've never really seen them until a few years back, obviously, when I went up to Shetland for the first time, to see them in their stunning breeding plumage. So when we went up to the hilltop to look for these, I was getting really excited. And as soon as we got to the top of the hill, and I could hear them calling, which is very ghost-like, and of course the mist rolled in, and this is the image I got. So I didn't quite get that ultimate red-throated diver with its lovely red throat picture that I really wanted, but just to see them or hear them through the mist was incredible indeed. And another diver that you get, especially through occasionally through spring, summer, and obviously now through winter, is the Great Northern Diver. They don't breed on Shetland, so they'll breed more up towards in Iceland and more of the high north, but they do come down to Shetland and down to sort of northern Scotland. And again, we do get these off the Yorkshire coast in the winter, but not looking like this at all. This is just literally slowly starting to turn out of its summer plumage. But look at that fantastic detail and colour on that, the blacks and the sort of silvers and the whites. And this is a quirky image. So obviously there's lots of marine mammals and lots of cetaceans around Shetland that I'll mention later, but this was just a common seal. And it was basically on some rocks before the tide rolled in. I was photographing around this bay for quite a while until slowly the tide came in, and then this seal woke up and it looks like a floating seal. Look at that, just stuck on the rock, looking around thinking, oh, suddenly the tide's come out of nowhere. So it's time to move on, but it was quite a quirky shot. It looks like it's just literally floating on water. Salkies, that's what they're called. Salkies, the name for seals up in Shetland. And then some of the other birds you occasionally get, especially migrant birds, are wheat ears. And this is a female wheat ear, just seen on a fence post as I'm driving along in the car. A lot of these were taken from the vehicle, using the vehicle as a hide. Again, May, June, you get lots of big numbers. Everywhere you go, you'll get a wheat ear flicking up onto a stone wall or onto a fence. And they've got some strange names as well. In Shetland speak. And then here's a lovely little male as well, male northern wheat ear, with that lovely grey blue back and that black sort of eye stripe through there, and a little bit of white around the eye. Stunning birds. And there's quite a few waders. There's a few waders on my hit list, as I'm going to show you in a few minutes, that I wanted to go up there and see on the breeding grounds. This is obviously just a common wader. We get these along the Yorkshire coast quite frequently. This is ringed plover, but we visited the island of Yell, and on Yell There is a very small airstrip that occasionally is used for the emergency service if we have to fly a doctor in or anything like that to the island. We got permission to go on to the airstrip because this is where a lot of the waders nest on the sides of the airstrip. And so these were taken from underneath the vehicle. So we'd park the car, get out the opposite side, crawl underneath the vehicle and just be patient. And these ring plover, which had chicks, were just running around and would just come and have a look at us basically. So we're using fairly long lenses just to keep our distance as well. So we didn't obviously get too close to them. We didn't want to stress them when they've got chicks, but they were very, very pleased, very okay with our presence, not flying off or being stressed or calling or anything. So it's nice to get a lovely portfolio of images of this sort of common bird, but there's such a stunning, beautiful bird indeed. And then another one of the waders is the dunlin, and they breed around the lochs and the lochans. This one's in summer plumage. You can see the black underbelly on this one here. Pliver's page, as they call them, up there. And then here's another image of a closer image of one in full summer plumage. So we get thousands of dunlin along the Yorkshire coast, especially down on the Humber estuary, which some of you have probably seen, but they're all looking very grey and dull in the winter. Still a nice little bird though, but in the summer they've got these lovely russet tones on the back there and that lovely black patch, belly patch. And again, some nice light on this one, low down by the side of the loch, get that nice low angle on this bird here that's doing a bit of a wing stretch. You can see the lovely colours of the dunlin here. And then snipe is another common bird up in Shetland. Check every ditch and dike as you're going along, there'll be snipe probing around, sat around in there. Or if not, especially early morning, because we were setting off very early, getting out straight away as early as we could, and then you'll find snipes out on the stone walls and again on the fence posts where they've roosted overnight, and they're just slowly waking up. So this is a picture of a common snipe here, just on a fence post. Oyster catcher, again, another common species we get here, but great to see them away from the rocky shoreline, up on the hilltops breeding in the grassy areas, and shelders. And again, they were in the flower meadows and everywhere, so it's just nice to get a little bit of colour in the image. But again, a common bird on Shetland, but great to see really close. All the birds, all the waders at this time of year are either on eggs by May, late May, early June, they've got chicks. And as you're probably aware, all waders lay a clutch of 4 eggs. So unfortunately, some of the waders didn't have all 4 chicks. They were getting predated, and I'll show you who by in a minute. But we did come across 1 or 2 that still did have 4, which was really nice. And they were protecting them obviously quite heavily from local predators. But it's always nice to see the little wader chicks. So here's another shot here of the young oyster catcher. And then redshanks. So again, redshanks we get here on the Yorkshire coast, a noisy wader. They're the sort of sergeant major of the wader world. So if you're photographing or trying to get close to waders, if the redshank sees you and calls, everything leaves the beach, and then you sat there on your own, more or less. So it was nice to see these redshank again on the breeding ground. This one was calling away to some chicks just below the post here. And it's just great to see them again up, you say, away from the coast really. So again, all shot from the vehicle, you could get very close to them. And then looking at backgrounds, this background here, funny enough, was a grey barn in the distance that I used to just to give you that background colour, and then the green of the field below. And it was constantly calling to chicks. Eventually it would just drop off the perch and drop down onto the grassy area. It was mainly shown by its red feet, obviously. And when it sat down there in that grass, it was so camouflaged, you could just literally walk right past it. The colours just complement the habitat. It's incredible, really. But one of the target waders that I really wanted to go and see, which we occasionally just get on passage, we might get a few stopping off in the odd fields on some of the cliff tops on the Yorkshire coast, but mainly they're just flying by and you hear them calling Wimbrel. So to see them up on the breeding grounds and to get close to them where I could get some images like this was truly special. So here's a Wimbrel here, again on the same island of Yal, just on the airstrip there. And then golden plovers. I'm sure you all know what these are, but living up near Wharfdale, around that area, up on the moors, and we get a lot of these in the North Yormouth National Park. This is a female, again calling for her chicks, and they're up on the highlands, on the high hilltops up in Shetland. Again, another common species, but lovely, lovely to see through the spring, summer months. So just a little variety of common waders there with the wimbrel thrown in. And then another speciality, bird speciality I wanted to go and see on the breeding ground was Arctic skua, or scuteolans as they're called. This is a pale phase Arctic skua, so you get a dark phase and a pale phase. And again, these were breeding high up on the hilltops. And the reason why they were up there basically was because they were breeding right next to the waders, and they were feeding on the wader chicks. So these were the main predator that takes a lot of the chicks up on the hills throughout Shetland, are the Arctic skuas. But I still think these are an absolutely stunning bird. And this one was fairly close, but again, using a long lens to sneak across the grass, laid flat down in the grass. And eventually you can see here, it was quite happy with my presence. It was just preening away, and it wasn't flying off too soon, which was good. So then we progressed a little bit higher up, past the sort of grassy moorland hilltops, right to the very top of the hills, and we came across this freshwater lochen, or small pond really, basically. They like to call them lochens. And I've been working with Shetland Nature, so if any of you know any of the guys from Shetland Nature, Richard Shucksmith being one of them, and Bryden Thomason. So Bryden created this little hide here, nothing too special, but it's good to hide in there to photograph the birds I'm going to show you again now. And you can see here it's just a wooden shed basically, where we can go inside, sit down, put our cameras in, and there's also a little slot at the front here of the hide, so I can lay down at water level, so I can get them really low angle shots. So you can see there's nothing much to it. You can just more or less get your head through the netting and the cameras through there, so the birds that come in won't be interfered by us at all, really. And then this is a little shot, obviously from the inside looking out, so they can't really see. You've got to be just careful moving your lens, don't move it too fast. But they're soon come in, and they're very happy with the presence of the hide and the camera sticking out of the netting. So it's for Arctic skuas again. So because the Arctic skuas need somewhere to wash away from the seawater, so this is obviously a little freshwater lochen on top of the hills, they would come in, and they'd come in big numbers as well. So we were getting 50, 60, 70 birds. This is a dark phase Arctic skua again. Sorry, different to the last one I showed you, which was pale phase. And you'll see in a minute we get both species, both subspecies, both species coming in to bathe. Now the light here wasn't great to start off with. It was still quite misty, still quite dark. So for those of you who are into a little bit of photography, I was shooting on quite high ISOs here, 5,000–6,000 ISO, to try and get a decent shutter speed to keep them semi-sharp while they're moving around and flapping about, washing. So here's another pale phase Arctic. So again, you can see the angle. This angle is taken from the low down slot in front of the hide. I was laid flat on my belly in the hide. And again, you can see another bird in the background. So more and more birds were coming in, light phase and dark phase, and they were fighting each other for position to get onto the loch and get bathing and get clean. So some good action to have. But then I was lucky, because then the sun came out, the light improved, so you can see a much different image here. It's much sharper, a bit more colourful, water's a bit more bluer, and you can see the definition in the eye there as well. And you can see here now much more detail because the light's much better. So it was just fantastic to be in the presence really of these Arctic skuas, both light and dark phase, right in front of me. And just not bothered about our presence, and they're just washing away and fighting away. So it's fantastic to see. And then eventually they'd leave the water, come and sit on the side of the loch and start preening and hanging out together basically, and then also flying around. So there's an opportunity to get flight shots as well, which was nice. So again, one of my target species ticked off to being seen on their breeding ground. So we do get them through the summer months and late summer especially, down the Yorkshire coast, but you mainly have to get a boat trip out to see them flying around. You won't see them up on the cliffs or anything like that on the Yorkshire coast. And then just moving away from birds a little bit, so let's have a look at some mammals. So Mountain hare was another species I wanted to really see. I haven't actually been up to the Cairngorms at present to see them up in the winter with their lovely white coats. So obviously I was visiting here June, July, so in the middle of the summer more or less. So they were looking like this, which was still quite smart. And they are quite different to our brown hare. They've got slightly shorter ears. They've got obviously a very pale white line around the ears. They've got the pale front belly, and then when you see them, they've got a pale underneath, and when you see them run away as well, they've got a pale backside basically. But just great to catch up with some mountain hares. It was the first for me a few years back when I took these images. And it took us quite a while to find them because they're so camouflaged when they're laid flat in the heather, you can see it in the undergrowth. So it was just nice to catch up with these lovely mammals. And again, you can see the white tail and the white backside here. So when they do run off, they do stick out a little bit. So you can soon pick them up running along the hills if they start moving around. So I had to take this image. We're driving along. This was taken at 2:30 AM. So up in Shetland, especially in the summer, there's only about 1 hour of darkness, if that. And then obviously there's 23 hours of daylight, more or less. So this was taken at 2:30 AM. We're driving along, getting to an area where we're going otter trekking for the day, really. And I spotted this sign, so I told Richard to pull over. I took a photograph. Thought, wow, how often do you see signs saying otters crossing? That is cool. So I took the picture so I could use it in talks like the one I'm doing this evening. And then I said to Richard, shall we just hang out a bit and just see if we can see any crossing the road? He said, no, there's no chance of that. He says, they put the sign in a totally wrong place. There's no otters around here. He says, well, they've never taken it down. So, but nobody knows that. So I thought, well, that's pretty upsetting, really, but never mind, but quite funny. So we moved on, and then we came to this big sort of area here on the coast, a big sort of estuary, more or less, coming in, reaping it. And we walked the shoreline. So again, this was around about 3:30 AM. The tide has to be low tide, obviously, and also it's quite windy, as a lot of you were aware. Up in Scotland, it's still a breezy day on the day I took this image and the day we went otter trekking, but we had to be downwind so the otters couldn't smell us, and we could sort of creep along as they were feeding out in the water and also in the seaweed and stuff. So it took quite a while to trek along this shoreline, and we did find other bits and pieces as we were going along. So this is a lion's mane jellyfish, quite a big one, as you can see. Still quite lethal. If you were to touch that or touch it with your fingers, you could still get a nasty sting, and you can see the size of it compared to my foot there. So it was huge. As we walked along, we found a few of these that had washed up on the shore, unfortunately. Then we started to see some tracks and signs from where the otters are and come in. So this little sort of empty pool here is normally full of water, and you can see some little otter tracks up the side here where the grass has been bent through, and they come here to drink just from the shoreline. You can see in the right hand corner, and over to the left hand corner, this white patch is old otter sprain. So you can see we found some sprains, and you could see the little tracks where they were coming to drink here. So it was a good area for them, and you can see here in this image the track going right through the middle where they just walk up to the drinking hole. And then further along we came across the otter halt. So again, this was about 3:30, 4 AM in the morning. Richard said there are otters in there, but he said they won't come out, they're very lazy, so we'll bypass this one and keep going and try and find some other otters. So we're actually after a female otter with 2 cubs that he knew were around the area quite recently. So we're still trekking along here. We had to be very quiet. We had to make sure that we're up against this sort of bank to our right hand side so they couldn't see our body shape, silhouettes of our bodies. We had to hide our profiles up against there, and we had to be very careful as we sort of walked over the gravel and the rocks, tiptoeing along really to keep noise to a minimum. So we went round this corner here, and then eventually we came across the mum and 2 cubs. So this otter here with a little pink spot on the nose is mum, and this is one of the cubs here, and the other cub was just out of the picture here when I took this image. But they were moving around, they were feeding on eels, butterfish, octopus, all sorts of invertebrates, crustaceans, shall I say. And then eventually the other cub came out, and then you've got mum and 2 cubs here. So it was great to see them, and we slowly started to sort of tiptoe around a bit so we could get a bit closer to them and just watch them playing around really and feeding in the water. So it was really great to see. And eventually mum came out and she decided she wanted to have a little rest. She shook off all the water, and then she started to rest in this bladderwrack seaweed here. And we slowly started to creep a little bit closer. She could sort of suss out we were there, but we were still quite distant, using big long lenses and converters to keep our distance as well, so we wouldn't startle her and scare her away. Eventually she decided she wanted a bit of a siesta, so which was great for us, so we could creep slowly a bit closer each time, but she was always aware. She could hear the odd crunch of a rock or a pebble as we were slowly walking along. But then she would sort of get used to our presence. She could sort of see us from a distance, but she was happy with the distance we were at. Then eventually she'd just drop into a rock pool in front of her, and then again she'd be feeding again and bringing out food to give to the cubs. So here's a big, huge edible crab that she caught. And then eventually back to the area where she wanted to go to sleep. So this was great. So Richard was getting really excited, saying this is going to be brilliant. The cubs are going to come in, they're going to be rolling around, they're going to be playing together, you're going to get some great shots. I was getting so excited myself. And there she is. But then suddenly she opened her eye, and just above us, 2 oyster catchers flew over. They must have seen us and they called. So it was a bit of a peep alarm call from the oyster catchers. And then she woke up, she slid through the seaweed to the left, out through the rock at the back to where the cubs were, and then we just never saw her again at all day. That's how stealth and how protective she can be with her cubs. So Dratses is the name for otters up in Scotland. And if you're interested, Bryden and Richard have wrote a fantastic book on otters as well. So it's definitely worth having a look at that if you can. I've got a copy, it's fantastic. I can't remember exactly what it's called, I should do really, but if you do Google otter books, you'll see it. It's a great book, all with some fantastic photography, as you can imagine. So moving on, we moved away from that area where the otters were. We moved over to one of the other smaller islands. It's another bird we were looking for, which is this little tiny black blob you can see on the rock here, just there. And this was another species that I've seen occasionally in winter plumage along the Yorkshire coast, but we don't get them breeding at the seabird colonies at Bempton Cliffs or at Filey or Flamborough. And it's this bird here. I'll show some of you know what this is straight away, but this is one of those photographs where it's guess the bird photograph, and that's pretty cool, but not as cool as this one. So can you still guess what it is? Maybe not. Very, very strange indeed, until it does this, and then it shows its head, puts its wings out, and you can just see a little bit of red foot there on the left corner. And this is the black guillemot, and we don't get any of these, unfortunately, breeding at Bempton with the 47,000 common guillemots or the 5,000 plus bridal guillemots. We just don't get them at all, which is such a shame. So for me to see them in the spanking breeding plumage, all black, red feet, and big white wing patches was just a real treat for me indeed. There's a small colony, there's probably about 15 or 20 of them. They're all in pairs. They're not like common guillemots where you see them in big long lines, very communal. They're in pairs, a bit like razorbills. So it was nice to catch them, and we had some sort of fairly decent lights, so you could see the detail in the eye here, because there's nothing harder than photographing whatever, a mammal or a bird that's all black with a black eye. If you don't get any what we call catch light in the eye, then the eye disappears and it looks like it's got no eyes, and it just doesn't look good. Or taistis, as they're called in Scotland. It's always good to catch up the taistis. So just a few images here of black guillemot, and of course when they call, they've got this lovely red gape as well. So they've got a big red mouth, red feet, all black, and just the white wing patches. Stunning birds indeed, absolutely stunning when you see them. So it's a bird that I hadn't seen in summer plumage before, and I had never got images of. So this was a double whammy for me to get close to them and see them like this, and also get some nice images, which was just great. So moving on to the island of Unst. So again, Unst is the most northerly island in the Shetland archipelago. Again, the local buses are the little ferries, the water buses. They are quite small. They come about every 15 minutes. It doesn't cost much. I think it's about £3 or £4 to take the journey with your vehicle, or it's even cheaper if you're on foot. And you can see here they only take about 8 to 10. Oh, I'll just go back. They only take about 8 to 10 cars across each time. So on some of the islands you go on, you sometimes hardly ever see people. I just see the odd car going past occasionally. So that's how wild some of the islands are. And it's always worth checking for cetaceans when you're going from island to island, and for any other maybe different seabirds, again, skuas, shearwaters, petrels. You're looking out for dolphins, porpoise, and if you're really lucky, you could get a minke whale, you get humpbacks occasionally there, and obviously orcas. So it's always worth a good look around when you go on the ferries from island to island. So we've gone up to the Isle of Hunts because we wanted to visit Hermanus Natural Nature Reserve, which is a huge seabird colony right on the western side of Hermanus. No, sorry, of Hermanus. And if you look at this sort of old interpretation panel picture here, Hermanus is basically a promontory here that sticks out. And on the left-hand side is basically where all the seabirds are, the sheer, huge cliffs here. And then over to the right-hand side, on the opposite side of the water, on the right-hand side, is another place I'm going to talk about later, which is called Saxaford. But we're going to look at Hermanus first. So you leave the car park, you walk along a small stony path until eventually you come to the start of the boardwalk. And then the boardwalk goes all the way up to the top, right to the top. You can see in the distance here. It takes probably about 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get up there. If you've got a lot of equipment, maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes. But it's all boardwalk all the way up now, so it's fairly easy to get up there. And once you get to the very top, then this is what you see. It's just incredible, mind-blowing scenery, true wilderness. So big rocky cliff faces, lots of rocky prominence sticking out of the water here, you can see out of the sea, just great scenery. And of course in here you've got lots of wildlife and lots of bird life as well. So as we sort of walked along and we're headed north along the western side, again just some of the scenery here, you can just see little fulmar flying past here, and again this image of the gannetry right at the top of Hermanus. So they've got a huge gannetry, and every bit of rock that sticks out basically as you walk along has got gannets on here. You can see here all these little white blobs of gannets. And then when you get looking closer, if you've got a telescope or a pair of binoculars or a long lens, you can start looking into the gannetry and getting really some good views of them. And again, you can see them quite close, and you can see how close they do nest to each other, just one beak peck away from each other. Yeah, and all these birds here had eggs basically. This was in early May that I visited Hermanus. So I'm used to gannets at Bempton obviously, but it was nice to see these another big huge gannet colony. And Soul and Goose is the name of the Scottish name or Shetland name for gannets. We've seen the Soul and Goose boy. And then here the little bit of rock on the right hand corner of this image here is another tiny little, you could class it as an island if you want, called Muckle Flugga, and this is the last piece of UK land before you go over north up to Norway. So the rock on the right here is the last piece of land, of UK land. And again, we were lucky that the sun came out. We got some good light, and you can see there's quite a lot of gannets here on Muckle Flugga, and you can see the lighthouse. So most lighthouses now around the UK are all automised, so there's nobody living there anymore. But it's good to see this lighthouse right on the top of that rock. How they built that on there, I just do not know. And again, you can see all the gannets on the side of Muckle Flugga here. So thousands and thousands of gannets all the way along Hermanus and even on to Muckle Flugga. And here's a close-up image of the lighthouse here. Now the little black speck to the left here, just coming into the image, is a peregrine falcon. So there was a pair of peregrines nesting on the lighthouse somewhere here, which was obviously being surrounded by thousands and thousands of gannets. So as we walked along the cliff line of Hermanus, then there was all sorts of stuff buried in the holes and the burrows, and starting with this bird, obviously the fulmar. I love fulmars. I think they're a fantastic seabird. They're quite overlooked, I think, in most seabird colonies, just because of things like puffins and gannets that are beautiful and colourful. And but the fulmar in its own right is stunning indeed. You know, with that what I call black mascara around the eye, and then you've got this big bill. You've got the tube nose on top here, the tube on top, which is related to so the fulmars are related to the albatrosses and shearwaters. And they've got an incredible sense of smell. So it's basically the tube on top is like an extra nostril. So when you look down the tube, it's got two cavities, not just one hole, it's got two cavities. And when we do boat trips off Bempton, I do my diving gannet photography boat trips, and we do throw fish out to attract the gannets to dive, and we're about 3 or 4 miles out. The first birds to arrive, maybe a few gulls, but mainly are fulmars. And it's been said that fulmars can smell through that nostril up to 7 miles away, bycatch, for being thrown off a trawler or a boat, to 7 miles away. How incredible is that? And then suddenly they leave the cliff, and then the next minute they're out there at the back of the boat. So they've got this incredible sense of smell through this tube nose system on top of the bill. And of course, it's got to be puffins up in Shetland, seabird colonies. There's got to be puffins, and on Hermanus is a healthy puffin population, or taminoris as they're known. So you're walking along, you don't sadly see any really, because they're all in the burrows, depending on the time of year. If you go in May, like I did, they're all sat on the egg in the burrow, and you just don't hardly see any. You see a few flying in or flying out maybe, but then if you sit quietly, then you start to get what I call periscoping, where they pop their head up out of the burrow and they start looking at you, and they're sometimes like this right in front of me. So they are beautiful birds to see, and I'm going to talk more and show you more images of the puffins just towards the end of the presentation tonight. Here's another shot of a close-up of a puffin, or Atlantic puffins as they're known. So just leaving Hermanus, like I mentioned, and going across the other side of the promontory is an area called Saxa Ford. There's an old military base there now that is actually, it was inhabited, but now they've rebuilding it, and it's active, but it's basically going to be a launch, one of the space launch sites. I don't know if it's for commercial space usage. I've heard that it's going to be used to launch satellites, obviously up into space. So whether or not it'll have effect on these birds, I'm not too sure. I'm sure they've done lots of surveying and looking at how most of the habitat and bird life and wildlife and fauna is protected. But anyway, at the moment they've got a big colony of these beautiful birds here. Some people don't like them because some people think they're ugly, but I think they're great characters. And these are bonxies, or great skua, should I say. Bonxie is the name that most of you probably recognise this bird to be called, and it's the Shetland name or Scottish name is bonxie. And you can see that I think they're quite spectacular in colour and texture and detail. I'll show you more about that in a minute, but they are a huge bird. They're similar size to great black backgull, not far off the size of a gannet, and they breed up in Shetland, again up on to Saxford and some of the other islands as well. So this bird here is sat on her eggs. You do, or can do, it hasn't happened to me, funny enough, but you can get mobbed by these if you do get too close to them. And again, with them being a big bird, you don't want them coming down and hitting you on the head. They'd probably knock you over, to be honest. But we were keeping our distance, using long lenses again, and binoculars, etc. And they were quite happy with our presence. So it's great to see them on the breeding ground. They're all in pairs. And then they would fly in, and you see the odd individual bird, and then another one would fly in and land next to it. And when they fly over each other, they tend to do this display where they put the wings out fully stretched and do a lot of head bobbing, and that's just to say that this area here is mine, so clear off basically if ever another skua flies over the top of them. So you can see here in this image both birds doing that, where the wings are stretched back and they're calling to say this is our little area, leave us alone. And sometimes the male will do the same to the female, so the male here on the left displaying to the female on the right. And then here's a nice image of the pair together. So very brown and speckly when you see them really up close. And this individual bird is basically going through each slide I'm going to show you now, is going through its bobbing and wind stretching procedure as the other birds fly over its head. So I was really, really pleased to see them on the breeding grounds compared to seeing the odd one or two flying underneath Bempton through the summer or around our boats through summer, early autumn on the Yorkshire coast. And then another spectacle of these birds at Saxiford is what we call the club, or the non-breeding club. It's basically a load of teenagers hanging around on a street corner. And you can see here, it looks like somebody has got a lawnmower out and literally done a cricket strip in the middle of all this wilderness. And basically all these birds have done this themselves. They've pulled all the grass out and formed this lovely short bowling green, basically. And this is where all the young non-breeders sit and hang around on this strip of grass here, looking to attract females or the males, and looking to fight for females, basically. So you can see there's quite a few birds here. There's up to about 50 or 60. If I panned right out and used a wider angle lens, you can see a lot more, but you can see there's quite a few here. And then as more and more birds have started to come in and land, then it would all sort of kick off and they would start to fight each other. And they're very, very aggressive birds. If you look, they've got a really big, long hooked upper mandible, the bill on the top hook down there. It's got a big hook, and they've also got, I'll show you in a few seconds, they've also got nails or claws on the feet. So for me, they're a half raptor, half seabird, and they don't half get stuck into each other. Sometimes you see feathers flying off, you do see blood, and they're battling each other for position to sit on that grass, and also to fight over females. So these are two males in a big brawl here. But again, on this close-up picture, you can see that really hooked upper mandible there, and that's what they use for basically tearing and ripping flesh. They're more of a carrion eater, to be honest. You'll see them on eating carcasses, anything that's dead. They will take small chicks, again, like the Arctic skuas do. And when we see them at Bempton, they will mob gannets and kittiwakes to make them regurgitate the catch and then steal the fish off them, or even mob puffins and to take the sand eels off them. So they're quite an evil bird, really. So as we were driving away from Saxiford, we saw one great skua unfortunately hit the overhead pylons here, overhead wires, as we were driving along, and we had a feeling it could still be alive. So we rushed over to see if it was, but unfortunately it wasn't. It perished with that electric shock. But just thought we'd take a few. I thought I'd take a few pictures just to show you the sheer size of these birds. They've got very similar wingspan, just under 6 foot to gannets, and you can see again here on this unfortunately dead species that the sheer size of that bill and that hook on top of the bill there. Well, the feather detail, absolutely stunning when you look really close. Beautiful colours, beautiful textures. So they are again another one of the seabirds that's a bit overlooked, underlooked, sorry. And when they are a spanking bird, really. And then look at the foot here. There's the 3 claws. So you can imagine those claws scratching and fighting, as well as that big bill. So again, half raptor, half seabird. So moving on from Unst, we then travelled south and went down to the island of Fetler. Fetler is managed by the RSPB. And there's nothing much to Fetler really. You get off the ferry and there's one road that goes right through the middle. So follow the road along and you'll come to this sign saying Funsey Hyde. And then over to the right is a small car park, excuse me, and an interpretation board here. And we basically came to look for this species here, which is the redneck pharaoh. So once you leave the car park, you walk across the sort of grassy area here, through the kissing gate. You can see the small hide in this picture here, just a little bit of a pool there in front of the hide. So you come to this green hide. It sits about 3 or 4 people. And looking through from the inside, this is what you see. It's very, very boggy, very green area. And then lots of small pools. So the redneck pharaohs like to breed deep in the grass here, and then they'll come out into the pools to feed. So a bit more of a wide angle here. You can see these 2 big pools out of the hide here. So we waited, as you do, 3 or 4 hours, didn't see anything at all, not even a call, even though we were tipped off that the birds were here. There was about 2 or 3 pairs. Again, it was only sort of mid-May, so it's still a little bit early, but they had arrived according to the RSPB warden. So then we moved away from the pools back up to the top car park where there's this big lock here. there's nesting birds here, Arctic skuas, Arctic terns, dunlins, curlew, etc. So there's certain areas obviously you couldn't go beyond because there was nesting birds. But you can see it's a big loch here, but very, very shallow edges. So you could actually literally walk more or less straight into the loch. You didn't have to go down a bank or down a small cliff or anything like that to get to it. So it's quite easy to set your cameras up and your scope right on the edge and scan across and check the loch for anything, and also check for any waders in the rocks here. So sometimes the red-necked phalaropes will sit in the pebbles and rocks motionless, and you wouldn't hardly see them, so camouflaged. So we had to have a good scan for quite a while, and trying to find any. But did we find any? No, we did not, unfortunately. But I've been back to Shetland quite often now, and I've picked up red-necked phalarope and had some fantastic views. I just haven't put any images in tonight, unfortunately. So what we did was we had a little van with us, and because we were getting up literally at 2 a.m. literally every day for 7 days, and bird watching and wildlife watching and doing wildlife photography all day, basically for 7 days. It was very tiring. So we'd take it sometimes in turns to have a bit of a sleep in the van. So Richard had gone off into the van and had a bit of sleep. I got my camera here. You can just see this image set up on the side. I've just gone back to get a drink from the van, and then I went back again to the side of the lochen, and then I could not believe my eyes what happened next. This is one of those incredible wildlife moments that most of us have probably had in our lives, where we've come across something that's just been amazing, and sometimes you just share it either on your own or with a friend and nobody else is about. And what it was, would you believe it or not, seven red-throated divers flew right over my head and then landed on the lochen right in front of me. Odd number, very strange. So what I worked out was there was definitely 3 pairs, and then this one individual bird that seemed to be just on its own. Very strange indeed. So I quickly ran and woke Richard up, obviously, and said, "You won't believe what's happened." He didn't believe me because he's never seen 7 red-throated divers together before on one loch. And suddenly I dragged him out, and he could not believe his eyes like me. It was just incredible. So we laid flat down, got our cameras ready, and just sort of waited to see what would happen. Would they all just fly off and that would be it, or would anything materialize? And why is the 7? And what's happening with this individual bird? So after a while, we realized that these 3 pairs were actually trying to scare off or pick on this individual bird for some reason. Not sure really. I mean, normally it's over territory, it's over breeding grounds, or it could be over, you know, them coming into where they've got a nest or chicks. But when you've got 3 pairs, and these 3 pairs were basically in harmony, they weren't bothered about each other, but this one bird was very edgy all the time and keeping its distance from the other 6. So this image here shows you a pair out of the 3 pairs, and then this individual bird out of focus in the front, and you can see it's like looking over towards the other 2 divers. And again, the individual bird is out of focus at the front, and this other one's just sort of looking at it and sticking its head out, and, you know, being a bit aggressive in posture. And it was very strange behaviour what we're witnessing. But what was amazing was that they were very close, and eventually the sun came out. We had some great light, which was what a bonus that was. And we couldn't believe our eyes of what we were seeing, but also what we were getting on our memory cards and our cameras. It was just incredible what images we were getting. So they would come closer and closer. This individual bird would literally be right in front of us, and the other pairs would be patrolling around. So look at this, stunning light, stunning bird. So eventually I got to see my red-throated divers in summer plumage, not in mist. Fantastic. And again, this is the individual bird, and it would just sit in front of us for ages and ages, and so close indeed that at one point, I know this sounds awful, but we were sort of not getting bored of it, but we're getting that many pictures. I thought, well, what can we do? You know, let's just see, let's walk away and get some sort of more habitat shots of it just sat as quite small on a loch. So we'd stand up, we'd walk off maybe, I don't know, 40, 50 meters, sit down, set our tripods back up, and the diver would follow us. So as we walked along the side of the lochen, the diver would just swim with us. And then it would come and sit right in front of us, and it was too close for using our big long 500, 600 mil lenses. So this was taken with a 100, 400 lens on 200 millimeters because it was so close. And then as we moved a bit more, it would follow us and it would sit right with us. So it was basically using us as sort of protection. It felt quite sort of at home in our presence, but didn't want to go out into the middle of the loch where the other six were. So it was very, very unusual behaviour. Then eventually it took off and it started to fly, and we thought, oh, it's definitely going now, so so be it. But it flew round the loch a couple of times, but then it came back and landed right in front of us again. And the other six were still patrolling around like battleships around the loch. Incredible to watch. So we forgot about the other six for a while, and we just focused on this individual bird because it was just a privilege to be in its presence so, so close. Look at the red eye, look at the detail, and just look at the images, just absolutely out of this world. Something I never dreamt of getting, indeed, you know, the images like this. And again, it was occasionally, it was calling, it was yawning, it was stretching, and eventually it decided it wanted to have a bit of a rest, have a little bit of a roost period, and then it would put its head in its wings here, but it'd always keep one eye open. It'd be always looking at the other six that were still patrolling around the loch. So again, the sun came out and we got some great images. Look at this, looking straight down the lens here at me, but also keeping its eye totally on the other six red-throated divers. But it got so close, it was ridiculous. I nearly had to get my phone out at one point. I could hardly use my small lens. But look at the detail, look at the eye, look at the colours, look at that. Oh my God, absolutely amazing. Unbelievable. It just brings back memories looking at these images. But so to be this close to a diver and it being happy with our presence was just unbelievable. And of course, we just got mesmerised by this single bird right in front of us. And then suddenly it all kicked off. We didn't even keep our eye on the other six. And then when I looked up, I did notice that they'd disappeared. I thought, oh, maybe they'd flown off, but no, they'd all dived under the water, heading towards this individual bird, and then suddenly all came out, was stamping on its back, pushing it under the water, trying to drown it. It was horrendous to watch. We're thinking, oh my God, you know, obviously you can't interfere, you just stood there watching, and there were only a few meters in front of us where this all happened. But there is a good ending to the story because the bird did actually escape the clutch of the six other divers and then did fly off and left, and then that just left us with the other three pairs for a while until eventually they left. But before they did leave, they started to do this and did displaying. If anyone's seen divers display, they swim along a bit like great crested grebes, but they're literally half submerged in the water. They propel themselves along and they just move their heads left to right in unison. It's great to watch. So we saw some of these divers displaying before eventually all the divers left the loch. But what a wildlife moment that was indeed, unbelievable. So moving on, we're going to move on to our last island now. And this is the island of Noss. And this is off mainland Shetland on the eastern side. So you go from mainland Shetland over to the Isle of Bressie. You go straight across Bressie, get another little ferry across to, then you come to the eastern side of Bressie, which you can see here. And then you can see the island of Noss just off Bressie here. You can see the full island. It's basically shaped like what we call like a wedge of cheese. So you've got that sort of shallow end at the front where there's a little building you can just about see there where the wardens live. And then it goes right up high, and then the cliff face right at the back is where the big seabird colony is. So again, it's a seabird colony, but also you do get otters here. You do get in the winter, you get big flocks of eiders, long-tailed duck, and then sort of late summer, you start getting the minke whales coming through, and if you're lucky, orcas and humpbacks. So here's just a panoramic of looking across to Noss from the pier that goes across, and it was a lovely day, and it's one of the best areas apparently for diving. So if you're into diving and marine life or marine photography, Noss is the place to dive. And then looking across here, you can see the building here, and that's the house where, like I say, where the wardens do live. So eventually there is a signal system where there's a sign, and it's got a green and a red. And you slide a piece of wood over the red, so it goes that shows the green panel. The wardens are looking out all the time. If they see the green panel, then they'll shoot across in their rib to pick you up. And they usually take 3 or 4 people over at a time. And then you can stay on Nos all day. And they like you to leave around about 5, 6 p.m. But it's a great island to visit. I do recommend it, especially if you're into your seabirds and your seabird photography, and also your flowers. So lots of beautiful sea thrift and other flowers along the island as well. But obviously we came mainly for a session with the puffins. So there's lots of puffins on Hermanus, but Nos is even better. Smaller islands, bigger numbers as well. So it's good to get close to them. And you can see here that you can get very close to them. So these my feet sticking out here, and you can see the puffins right on the end here, and they weren't bothered again with us being so close. In fact, here's Richard with a very small wide angle lens with a filter on to take a really good habitat shot of these puffins sat here with the full cliff and islands pin sharp in the background. You need those small wide angle lenses to do that. And these puffins were very obliging indeed, just didn't move, were very happy with us looking at them very closely. And you can see it's quite a big rocky area, big rocky cliff face as you walk along, and you can just see Richard up in the top here, right at the top there, so you can see how small he looks there, and below him all the little white dots and blobs below him are puffins. So mainly we were looking for puffins, but when you get to the very top of the island of the wedge of cheese and you look over, then these big cliffs here again covered, we'll just go back, covered in gannets as well as a big gannet tree. But we'd got most of the gannets and got some really good gannet shots at Hermanus, so it's the puffins we're after. So I'm just going to finish off now with a few puffin images, just to show you how beautiful puffins are, and especially in the habitat that Shetland has to offer. Again, these beautiful flowers in May and June, which cast some nice colours in your image. And there were still nest building by towards the end of May. So basically, every time you saw a puffin, if it did have quite a lot of stuff in its beak, then basically that would be its full nest it was carrying more or less in its beak. So here is a good example. This puffin here has got a few feathers and it's got some grass. That basically is its full nest. It'll go down into its burrow, drop that in the burrow, sort of crush it down a bit with its feet, and then lay a single white egg on top of that carpet of vegetation. That's it, that's the nest. But again, lots of opportunities to get some really lovely angles and shots of these birds. You do get them at Bempton obviously as well, but they're much more tricky to get close to at Bempton because of the fences, etc. But here, very, very accessible. And it's great to see them doing the little bill tapping together as part of the courtship. And again, getting lots of grass. And I was laid flat on the floor, sat basically on my backside with my legs wide open, using a very small low down tripod. And what I didn't realise at the time was that between my legs was a puffin burrow. It was sort of hidden with grass really, you couldn't see it. And this puffin suddenly came running out of nowhere towards me. And I thought, oh my God, it's a kamikaze puffin, it's going to knock me right over. And I've more or less nearly closed my eyes, and it ran straight at me and then went right between my legs down into its burrow. And I thought, oh my God, there's a burrow right there. So I backed off. Not that it was bothered, to be honest, but I backed off to give it some space. But this image basically is a puffin running right at me, which was incredible as well. And then I got a quick headshot of it before it went down into the burrow. And I say they do mainly collect vegetation, and sometimes they will pick flowers. I don't think they realise that they're picking flowers. It's just any vegetation they'll grab in the beaks. But it's just lovely to see so many puffins in such a picturesque place as well. And then final couple of pictures. Just backgrounds here, again using the grey cliffs to get that sort of grey background here, and then using some of the darker shadow of the cliff areas to get some nice jet black backgrounds as well. Something just a little bit different to add to the image. And then sometimes you get groups of puffins. I've seen 4 or 5 puffins all having a bit of a sort of talk to each other, bill tapping, and then sometimes they're fighting again for a partner. So this was quite a good image, seeing 3 of them together, all bill tapping together. And then just to finish off, Richard and Bryden have put together for me a nice video It's only runs for about 3 or 4 minutes, just to basically everything I've more or less shown you tonight in a 3 or 4 minute video clip. So turn up your volumes and please enjoy this clip. So like Helen mentioned right at the start, I am director or fellow director of Yorkshire Coast Nature Tourism Company based here on the Yorkshire Coast. So we do the following services if anybody is interested in coming on some of our tours, trips and workshops, not just photography, obviously wildlife watching, anything from wildflower walks to fungi walks to insects to birds to mammals. We do the whole range. This is our website, yorkshirecoastnature.co.uk. And if you are interested in wildlife photography, click on our wildlife photography tab, and there's lots of different events that we run right through the year, through all 4 seasons. And please go onto our homepage, go down to the bottom of our homepage, and here you will see where you can sign up to our newsletter. So if you're interested in receiving our monthly e-newsletter on what tours trips we have around the North Yorkshire, Yorkshire coast, the UK and international. We do lots of international trips. Everything's on hold because of COVID at the moment, obviously, but please do sign up to our e-newsletter. And then finally, if you've got a phone handy, take a photograph of this screenshot of the screen now, and these are our social media channels. So these are my personal social media here at the top, which is Steve Race Wildlife Photography, and this is our company, Yorkshire Coast Nature, here as well. So we're on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. So thank you very much for inviting me to talk again to Wharfdale Naturalists. Hopefully, if you've not been to Shetland before, I'm sure you want to go now. And if you have been to Shetland before, you want to go back again, because it's an absolutely amazing place for wildlife. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Steve, thank you. What a great tour of Shetland, and we're delighted to allow you a bit longer than we normally have for our speakers to
sorry about that.
to do that. No, it's fine. You did warn us, and it's well worth it. So thanks for that. Just time for a couple of brief questions, given that we've gone a bit longer than usual. The first is just around divers. Is the Great Northern Diver the same species as the Canadian loon?
Yes. Yeah, it is. Yeah, divers are all loons. Yes, yeah. So yeah, a good place to see them is, funny enough, is in Canada as well. That's a great place to see them, on the breeding grounds over there. And then obviously Iceland is another exceptional to see them. If you want to get up close to them and see them, like I more or less like I saw the red-throated divers. But you do get them along the Yorkshire coast. We've had 1 or 2 already off the Yorkshire coast last few weeks, but in the next few weeks and months we'll get quite a few, probably in Scarborough Harbour and probably Whitby Harbour around there. But they won't look like they did in that image I showed you. But yes, same species. Yeah.
And also on divers, do you get black-throated divers on Shetland quite widely?
No, they don't breed on Shetland. No, they breed on some of the other islands. Hander is a good one where they breed on the Isle of Hander. So you do get them breeding up, obviously, up in Scotland. So you don't get Great Northerns, but you do get black-throateds breeding on some of the islands, but not on Shetland, just red-throated. Okay,
thank you. And then lastly, clearly there's loads to see in springtime, early summer, when all the birds are breeding, displaying. What can you see kind of late summer, autumn, or very early spring? Is there much to see up there?
Yeah, there's always stuff to see. I mean, obviously bird life, you've got the migration happening obviously in early spring, so sometimes lots of rarer birds coming through. We've started to go up there now in July and August, so we can see the orcas. So they're getting really good sightings of orcas over the last few years. They've been coming in, unfortunately feeding on the seal pups and some of the seals, but it's incredible to watch them. And you can literally watch them just on mainland Shetland as well, you know, so you'd have to go over to some of the islands, and they're coming right close into the shoreline as well. So yeah, it's incredible what you can see through the different seasons, really. But more sort of autumn, winter, you're looking at, especially bird life, you're looking at more of the sort of winter ducks and things like that, really.
Thank you. That's great, Steve. I say time's pressing, so I'll pass you back to Helen to sum up.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks very much, Jeff. And thank you, Steve, for an absolutely brilliant set of pictures. I mean, I just have to marvel at the skill and the patience that must go into getting some of those pictures. Thanks, absolutely fabulous. I know everyone will have their favorites. I thought those skua close-ups were absolutely amazing, especially the Arctic ones, because I haven't really seen those close-up before. Yeah. The black guillemots, obviously, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, that kind of golden spangle on the golden plover. Beautiful, beautiful shots. And I also just love hearing those fantastic stories that wildlife watchers are able to tell about those moments that, you know, of magic. Yeah. When the red-throated divers came down. I mean, what that must have felt like. I can only dream of moments like that. Absolutely wonderful.
It was one of the true special moments indeed. It was.
Yeah, amazing set of shots, absolutely amazing. So thank you so much. I just need to remind people about the next meeting, which will be, I think, on November the 23rd. We are going to have Richard Greenwood, whose talk is entitled "If You Go Down to the Woods Today, Photography in the Boreal Forests of Finland." So I'm sure that will be well worth turning up for. Thank you so much again, Steve Race, for an amazing talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.